Yes, the original guitarist in what became the Revolution.
And how did that start? How did you become the guitarist for Prince? That's a great story.
Yeah, it's an interesting story in that Prince was initially almost like an urban legend in the Twin Cities. You know, there was just in the music stores and elsewhere, there was this talk of this 17-year-old kid who, you know, was kind of another Stevie Wonder, played every instrument and was, you know, kind of a virtuoso. And so I heard about him before I met him, and the meeting came about really through an ad in a local music paper, like what the scene would be here. Warner Brothers recording artist seeks guitarist and keyboardist. Knew that there was nobody else within 600 miles of the Twin Cities at the time that was signed with any major label, so I knew who it was. And it was in a band that I had started a few years before that was in the death rattle stage, and knew I needed to find the next move. So I called, set up an audition, had literally a 15-minute audition because I was on my way out of town to play, you know, East Crevice, South Dakota or someplace. And Prince took me on the parking lot. We talked for about 10 minutes after the 15 minutes of playing, and that was it. He started calling me on a weekly basis after that, and about a month and a half later, his manager handed me a check at rehearsal one day, so I knew I had a job.
And so, for how many years did you tour and work with Prince?
For 5 years. Yeah, 5 years.
And you had a hand in a lot of the big hits, a lot of the songs people know. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it was great. We spent a lot of time. The musical rapport was a real sort of practical element of who we were and kind of the early development of who Prince became as an artist. So we spent a lot of time just sort of hatching musical ideas, some of which turned into songs, some of which turned into songs that we actually farmed out to these sort of spin-off acts that we created over time. No pun intended, because one of them was called The Time. So things like, you know, Little Red Corvette in 1999, it was just kind of an outgrowth of, you know, that sort of shared musical language. I mean, literally with both 1999 and Little Red Corvette, Prince just called me up one day. He was working on the new record, recording it at his house, and said, hey, there's a couple of things I want to try. Can you come over? So, I mean, I was there for maybe an hour and a half, recorded, you know, my co-lead vocal on 1999 and the guitar solo on Little Red Corvette, which years later, you know, I think it was Guitar World magazine called it the 64th greatest solo of all times, which is pretty funny because it was just kind of like, let's just do a few takes and comp it down, and okay, there it is, you know.
So just 90 minutes for those two songs.
For those two songs, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, you hear him being called a musical genius. Like, you know, that's a fair
Yeah.
title. What is it like when you're sitting there having this musical rapport, hatching these ideas? What was it like getting creative with him?
It's interesting at the time because there's not necessarily the perspective that you have later. It was who we were and what we did. And we felt, all of us were supremely confident, probably borderline arrogant young people. And so we just had the sense that this is the band that's going to rule the world. And we're going to be the best we can be at everything we do. And we're going to leave no doubt. I mean, that was just the mindset. So you get perspective on that later on, but at the time, you're just, you know, rolling up your sleeves and working as hard as you can.
And what were those 5 years like? I mean, traveling with Prince, I mean, there's such a mystique surrounding him. Did that mystique happen off stage as well?
It's funny, off stage, over time, yes, the mystique became part of the value proposition, so it had to be protected. In the beginning, we were, you know, pretty much just goofy kids who loved video games, and on days off would spend our per diem in video arcades and playing practical jokes on each other. Over time, as the franchise grows, you know, there's a little bit more of a vested interest on the part of a lot of people to protect the brand, which I understand because oddly enough, that's what I do for a living now. But as it was happening, you know, we were just kids, literally living the dream. So,
yeah, definitely something I think a lot of people would love to be a part of. And it kind of in the later years, you know, after you left the band, you came here to Nashville. Did y'all stay in contact? What was your contact like with each other?
It's funny. Earlier today, I was telling someone Prince wasn't the kind of guy that you'd look at your phone and there's an emoji and he shot you a text. Not that guy. He was the kind of guy that was engrossed in what he was doing in his world, intensely focused and serious about everything he did. But if you weren't in that frame in that moment at the time, it wasn't that you didn't matter. It's just that he was in that moment. But when, the moment came back around, it was as though he never left. So we literally didn't see each other. There was about a 20-year span where we didn't see each other. Messages would get sent through people, his people to my people, whatever, from time to time. I would hear things like, artists would contact me and say, Prince told me that if I was ever in Nashville, you're the man and I'm supposed to get hold of you, which I thought, oh, that's flattering, but I'm just one of many in Nashville. But in 2004, he played here at the arena, and we managed to work it out so that we were able to, in the time between shows, because he does the big show and then he does the show after the show, or did. So we actually sat in the dressing room at the old Rocket Town and hung out for about an hour, and it was like, we hadn't missed a beat. So that's really more who he was, not the kind of guy that, was going to, direct message you on Twitter. But
And when was the last time you guys talked to each other?
we actually talked on the phone about 3 weeks ago, had about a 30-minute conversation, which shall forever remain private. But yeah, that was very, very much ironic now that we hadn't spoken since 2004, and then we just spoke again just a few weeks ago.
And I know you said it would forever be private. I mean, he seemed healthy. Like, what did he seem like on that phone call?
Seemed healthy, seemed very, very focused, very much about his business. And there was no indication to me that there were any health problems at all. Yeah. In fact, when we heard about the incident where they had to make an emergency landing a few weeks ago, I mean, that was a surprise. It was, you think, well, he had the flu. When you're touring, you don't want to cancel dates, and the show must go on. I get it. So it was a shock to us that there were any problems beyond that.